Hello there, Mad Mike here, and welcome back to the channel. And today we're going to be talking about something kind of interesting. It's going to be a little bit of I don't want to say a broad subject because it's about a specific film, but it's going to be kind of a summing up of what we've seen so far for Disney's live action remake of Mulan. Now, I'm going to say this now. I was never a really huge Disney animation fan when I was a kid. A lot of the stuff I watched was more Warner Brothers related. So I was more into stuff like, Looney Tunes and things like that. The superhero shows they were doing at the time, like Batman and Superman, stuff like that when I was a kid. I didn't really get too much into the Disney stuff. I didn't really like it. I wasn't a big, even though I think they're good movies, I didn't have any attachment really to Lion King or Aladdin or Little Mermaid because I didn't really care about them when I was a kid. And same thing with Mulan. Mulan can be bunched into that core group there, along with like Pocahontas and stuff like that. Stuff that went through the early to mid '90s. And now that, but I have seen the original Mulan, and it is interesting to see what they're doing with this film, because this film is looking to be a very steep departure from what we are more familiar with the animated feature. Now, I think a lot of us know the story, but just for the sake of the people that don't, Mulan is basically about a Chinese girl who her father is kind of older and sickly, but he gets drafted to go off to war, and she takes his place and poses as a man in the army, and there's a talking dragon voiced by Eddie Murphy. But it's basically about her, and then her after that, her journey through basic training and going into battles and finding out she's a woman and stuff like that. So, it's an interesting little story, but I think the thing is that we're going to see a very serious tonal shift with this remake, with this live action remake that they're doing of it. And we kind of saw that in the first trailer to an extent. We saw that there was a lot more combat related stuff. It showed that Mulan was a lot more capable of a fighter than what we are accustomed to. Again, with the animated version, it seemed like she was very easily able to use swords and spears and stuff. And there's a shot of her using a bow as well. So it seems like she's very adept at actually being a warrior, which I think is kind of interesting in comparison to the original, where she was just kind of bumbling and, she was smarter than the people around her, which kind of wound up being her weapon. But like I said, it looks like we're kind of departing from that. They also announced that the Mushu character that was originally voiced by Eddie Murphy is not going to be in the film, and they are not going to be doing any musical numbers, which I think is another interesting thing, or they're going to tone them back at least. And that's interesting from the standpoint of, look, when you look back at Jon Favreau's Lion King, the live action one that came out, I believe, last year, or the year before, that was almost a shot-for-shot remake of the original Lion King. None of the lines were really changed all that much. They kept it very, very similar to the original, which wound up being one of the things that a lot of people criticized it for, was that it was kind of just a paint-by-numbers movie. Now, this appears to be doing the opposite effect of that, where it's removing a bunch of this more cartoony and playful stuff we kind of associate with Disney, and instead making it a bit more, I guess, realistic would be the tone, or a bit darker in tone than what we would automatically put into children's entertainment. Because again, even though the movie was kind of it was about war and stuff like that, the original, the animated one, they still did have those moments, again, with the Eddie Murphy dragon Mushu, who was very, he would fly around, he had his musical numbers, he had a bunch of one-liners, because again, it's Eddie Murphy. And I thought that, even though I'm not really attached to the movie, I thought that the comic relief was kind of good for something like that, because it was essentially a war story. You don't want to get too, when it comes to something like that subject in a children's film, you kind of don't want the kids to stay on that subject, at least their minds to stay on that subject for too long. And Eddie Murphy's Mushu was a good way of breaking that up. And now without that, I'm curious what this is actually going to look like as a finished product. because again, it seems like they're removing a lot of the more child-friendly elements from the film, which is strange considering that I would assume they'd be trying to market this movie very similarly to what they marketed the first one as, and the other Disney live-action remakes, which again were all kind of aimed at kids. Even though I think this will probably it'll still be aimed at children, it's going to take things in a bit more of a serious light. Which again, I don't know if that's going to screw up their demographic. It's very possible that it could. They might skew a little too high, and a lot of boys or a lot of children might not want to see it. Um, so it's going to be interesting to see moving forward. Again, this is you know what my feelings are already about Disney live action remakes in general. I think they're kind of a waste of time. I mentioned that. Look, I've seen a better version of it already. Why the hell are you giving this to me again? And Mulan, I think, again falls into that. But again, I'm not overly attached to the original films for the most part. So having them redo those films it doesn't hit me on kind of a visceral level, like some other stuff might have. Again, it's not something that's kind of near and dear to me, so I'm willing to at least look at what they're giving me and judge it on its own. But at the same time, I don't really think it needs to exist, which is really my main point on it. It doesn't necessarily matter if it's good or if it's bad. Does it really need to be here if we already have the other one? But it's just kind of an interesting little take on that. Again, I'm going to kind of follow the production of this film a little bit. I'm sure they're going to have another trailer before the actual film comes out, so I might do a breakdown of that. But I'm very curious to see how far they're willing to take this. If this is going to be something that's a bit more, adult oriented than some of the other Disney live action programs that are on there. But I want to know what you think. Does this kind of angle on this story interest you at all? Are you kind of sad that they're getting rid of the talking dragon and maybe not getting Eddie Murphy back for just for shits and giggles? Or do you not care because it's a Disney live action remake and you have the animated one, so why should you give a shit about this one? As usual, leave your comments below. Again, I like to read them. Hit the bell for notifications, hit the like button, subscribe, and remember, I live my life free of compromise. Do you?